Hello, and welcome to the session on statement and assumptions. Hi, I'm Ravi, and my Twitter handle is at the rate Ravi Handa. You can use that to connect with me and provide feedback. Now, what we are going to do in this session is first, we'll have a look at the format of the questions, and then we'll look at some solved examples. As you would agree, that solved examples are probably the best way to learn any type of questions and topic. So, to begin with, what exactly is the format of the question? Now, in statement and assumptions, in each question, you will be given a statement and it will be followed by two assumptions. Well, sometimes it is also three assumptions, but we'll primarily look at the case of two assumptions. They are numbered 1 and 2. You have to consider the statement and the assumptions, and then you need to decide if only one is implicit, if only two is implicit, if either one or two is implicit, if none of them is implicit, or if both of them are implicit. It could be either of these five choices that you'll have to deal with. Now, it is also important to understand that what does implicit mean? Implicit essentially means that the assumption which is given can be derived from the statement which is given, or it is understood. It is a given. Well, this will get clear once we take a few examples. And before we get to solving the examples, I request you that before you look at the solutions, pause the video and try and solve the questions yourself. Okay? So this is the first set. You may pause the video here. To continue, statement 1 says that Sachin's mother instructed him to return to home by train if it rains heavily. First assumption is Sachin may not be able to decide himself if it rains heavily. Second assumption is trains may ply even if it rains heavily. Now, we are not given anything about Sachin's deciding abilities or anything like that. So that is definitely invalid assumption. However, the trains may ply even if it rains heavily. That is a valid assumption. It is an implicit assumption because that is why Sachin's mother is instructing Sachin to travel by a train. So in this case, as per the options which were given to us, you would have marked B as an answer. Let's look at the next one. Please put more people on the job to make up for the delay. First assumption is delay is inevitable in most jobs. Second assumption is output will increase with more number of people on the job. Once again, we do not know about the nature of the job, and it is not necessary that all jobs get delayed. So first one is an invalid assumption, whereas the second one, that is implicit. Well, only then the statement even makes sense. If putting more people on the job would not have made any difference, then then no one would recommend to put more people on the job. That is the reason why someone is suggesting to put more people on the job, because the output will increase. So that is an implied or an implicit assumption, and that is the reason why you will mark B in this case as well. Let's look at the third statement. It says, if you are an engineer, we have a challenging job for you. So the first assumption is we need an engineer. Second assumption is you are an engineer. Very clearly, second is invalid in this case. Why? Because I have a statement if here. The word if itself implies that it is a conditional thing. It is not necessary that you are an engineer. However, from the statement, it is obvious that we, the company here or whoever is speaking, he or she requires an engineer, which means this becomes statement 1 becomes implicit, whereas second one is invalid, and that is the reason you would have marked A in this particular case. Moving on to the next set of problems. Once again, you can pause the video if you like. To continue, let us look at the statement which says, in spite of poor services, the commutators have not complained against it. Now, first assumption is people do not tolerate poor services and hence they complain. That is what this in spite of here is implying. So, which means first one is definitely an implied assumption or an implicit assumption. Complaints sometimes improve services. No one here is talking about improving the services. They are just reflecting a fact that people do complain if they do not like the services which are given. So, which means the answer for this particular question would be A, that only the first one is implicit. This is an edit that I wanted to insert. Well, it should be commuters and not commutators, as I have said in the previous example. Commuters are people who commute from one particular location to another location, and hence the question of services arises. Whereas commutators, some of you might know, are switches which are used in electrical motors. So, just an edit that I wanted to insert. Next one. In view of a violent situation due to students' agitation, the state government has decided to close down all the education institutions in the state for 2 weeks with immediate effect. So what has happened is there is a student agitation going on and the state government has decided that they will close down all the education institutes. How will this effect? What will be an effect of it? One is that the tempo would die down and the student agitation may subside after 2 weeks. So that is a implicit assumption. And also, once you once you shut down all the education institutes, the students might not have a place to gather and continue agitation. And this is also a way of turning down the agitation which is going down or control the agitation which is going down. So in this case, we can see that both the assumptions are implicit, and that is why we would mark E in this particular case. Next statement says, the economic prosperity of any nation is dependent on the quality of its human resources. Okay. First assumption is it is possible to measure the quality of human resource. Well, if you can't even measure it, then how will you say that economic prosperity is dependent on it or not dependent on it? So, the fact that the economic prosperity is dependent and you can suggest anything about it, that itself implies that you can measure the quality of the human resources. So A is definitely an implicit assumption, the first one. How about the second one? Achieving economic prosperity is a cherished goal of every nation. This is not necessary. Nowhere in the question it is mentioned that the nation wants to have economic prosperity or anything like that, which means the second one is definitely not required, and that makes the answer as option A. Let us look at one final set. Once again, you can pause the video here, try doing the questions on your own, and we'll discuss them. To continue, the statement given is if it does not rain throughout this month. So this itself shows that it is very, very important for the rain to happen this month. Most farmers would be in trouble this year. The first assumption is timely rain is essential for farming. Well, yes, the time aspect is very much highlighted in this statement when they say that if it does not rain throughout this month. Another thing is that most farmers are generally dependent on rains. Once again, because it clearly says that if it does not rain, most farmers are in trouble. If they are in trouble, that means they are dependent on the rains. Which means that in this case, both the statements or both the assumptions are implicit, and I would mark E. Let's look at one more. Money is the root cause of all problems in the family. First assumption is every problem is caused by something. Well, we are just talking about problems in a family. We are not talking about all problems. So I cannot comment upon whether every problem is caused by something or not. So this has got nothing to do with the statement which is given to me, which makes this one as not an implicit assumption. Second one says there are always some problems in a family. Once again, it is not necessary. See, the statement says if there are any problems, then money is going to be the root cause of all of them. But nowhere does it say that there will be problems. So again, in this particular case, well, neither the first one nor the second one is an implicit assumption, which means I'll have to mark D in this particular case. The last statement, I have just taken one of this type because you get sometimes questions on this time when the statement is not just a statement but it is an advertisement. So an advertisement leads to an implication in many ways. Say for example, an advertisement here says, our shoes are for the rich. So now the marketer, the guy who is advertising, he wants to market his shoes in such a way that people who want to look rich or who want to appear rich will buy this. Very similarly, like fairness creams, for example, they want to, they are selling something which can make people fairer. But the idea is they are making an assumption that people want to be fair. Very similarly, in this case, the first statement is many people like to be labeled as rich. So again, that is a very fair and a very implicit assumption. Whereas the second one says one can't become rich unless one has that brand of shoes. Again, that is definitely not true. One can be rich. Again, in many ways, this is not an implicit assumption, which makes the answer as option A. So these are some of the questions. I request you to try out more questions of this type. If you have any doubts in any of these questions, you can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Via Twitter, my Twitter handle is @RaviHanda. You can also email me on my mail ID, which is ravihanda@gmail.com. Thank you.